December the 1st, 1955, on a public bus in Montgomery, Alabama, life began to change. By refusing to give up her seat to a white man, a tired seamstress named Rosa Parks quietly ignited a revolution.
The day that Rosa Parks was arrested, a low murmur went through the whole city. And overnight, this thing bloomed.
Led by a charismatic young preacher named Martin Luther King, the city's black community organized a peaceful boycott of the buses. They walked instead.
We will do it in an orderly fashion. This is a non-violent protest. We're depending on moral and spiritual forces.
White policemen responded by arresting black carpool drivers. White extremists bombed King's home.
Martin always said, you know, if you don't have anything that you die for, what do you have to live for? Nobody thought we could stay off the buses. None of those people wanted to lose their jobs. But Martin Luther had instilled in them so rightly that we must all make a sacrifice, that the buses continue to run empty.
They did, for 381 days. On November the 13th, 1956, the Supreme Court ordered the buses desegregated. Martin Luther King was now the undisputed leader of the civil rights movement.
The colored population idolized Martin Luther.
We are not going back to the buses bragging about a victory.
People experienced a self-esteem that they had never experienced before. And they had been given
for the last 12 months.
a light, a beacon at the end of the tunnel.
In 1961, the author James Baldwin wrote, "To be a Negro in this country and to be relatively conscious is to be in a rage all the time."
It was two worlds, a black world and a white world. As a young child, I remember very well seeing the signs, and I resented it.
If you went to the Dairy Queen, white people would go in and sit down. You got your ice cream at a window.
I never rode a bus because I knew I'd have to sit in the back. I didn't go downtown to the movie theaters because I'd have to sit in the Jim Crow gallery.
I remember on one occasion I tried to go to the county library, and we couldn't even go in and check out of a book.
That did not change until the Civil Rights Movement.
In the early 1960s, young people would take the lead in the battle for racial equality. Federal courts had ruled that segregated waiting areas in bus stations were illegal, but the law was not being enforced. To pressure the Kennedy administration to intervene, activists rode public buses into the Deep South to integrate the facilities. Outside of Anniston, Alabama, the bus carrying the first group of self-proclaimed Freedom Riders was firebombed.
By the time the Freedom Ride started, there was a realization that some of us would have to die and that we should not fear death. And we liken this very much to military service, that if you serve your country in the military, you might lose your life. We were serving our country at home.
We knew that this was a very dangerous mission, but we felt we had a moral obligation and a mandate to make this trip.
John Lewis, then a student leader, was a Freedom Rider on a bus that arrived in Montgomery, Alabama.
The very moment we started down the steps, a mob out of nowhere, people by the hundreds, came out with baseball bats, stones, chains, and started beating us. I was hit in the head with a wooden crate, and I was left lying unconscious in a pool of blood. I thought I was going to die.
Many of the young people in the civil rights movement united in an organization called the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC.
SNCC is special because we are young. We're 17, 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old. Most of us have dropped out of school, so we're no longer students, but we don't have mortgages, we don't have car payments, we don't have families, we don't have husbands and wives and children. So we can do these things. And because we're young, we're also foolish, and we're willing to take risks.
We wanted to create a mass movement. We wanted to get hundreds and thousands of people involved.
We had been talking about developing a nonviolent army that would be prepared to go into a community, be arrested, court arrest, and so forth, break down that fear of jail as a weapon, and also break down the infrastructure of the local area by filling up their jails.
All right, let's stop it right here.
It was a tactic that SNCC took to Albany, Georgia.
Anybody who found the courage to be involved could be involved.
In the first weeks of the Albany campaign, more than 500 young people were arrested.
Once you get in jail, it's a sobering experience because jail is not like a rally and jail is not like a march. Some people would get into jail, they would clang those doors and they would actually cry. And then there would be people who felt that we're in jail and we need to pray. Then there were teenagers who wanted to do rock and roll, or they were talking about their boyfriends.
The movement was energized, but the law did not change. The 9-month effort to desegregate Albany, Georgia, failed. The next major campaign was fought on even tougher ground.
It was probably the most violent and vicious racist city in the South. There had been 60 bombings of black people's homes in Birmingham in 61 and 62.
One target for the movement in Birmingham was to desegregate the schools. Alabama's governor, George Wallace, had promised they would stay white.
And I say segregation now, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever.
Our demonstrations in Birmingham were usually simply marches to the courthouse or to City Hall. And we almost never got more than 2 blocks from the church, and then we were arrested.
Day after day, hundreds of demonstrators filled the Birmingham jails. Among those arrested was the organizer of the Birmingham campaign, the Reverend Martin Luther King, Jr. By then, he was the acknowledged leader of the entire civil rights movement.
My heroes for the second half of the 20th century, Martin Luther King. All of these people are people who accepted the fact that you have to put everything online. Because if you don't, you're not going to get anything. Not in America. Because America is not going to change. Only you can change.
As part of the campaign, Dr. King enlisted an army of school children, aged 6 to 16. After the first day of demonstrations, nearly 1,000 of them had been herded into police vans and sent to jail. The next day, the police changed their tactics.
The law enforcement in Birmingham was headed by one Bull Connor. And Bull Connor was an old-fashioned lock 'em up, throw 'em in jail, throw away the key, beat 'em up, put dogs on them, hose them down with fire hoses. Anything he could think of to try to stop this movement by force, he did.
I watched the violence in Birmingham on TV. It shocked me to see the dogs being unleashed on people, and it shamed me.
This was the front page of every major newspaper in the world, and it told a story that America was ashamed of.
Fires of
Trying to raise congressional support for the Kennedy Civil Rights Bill, civil rights leaders called for a march on Washington. On August the 28th, 1963, more than 200,000 people showed up.
We knew it was a special day. And once I got there and saw the crowds coming from all over America, black and white, poor people, rich people, show business, politicians, Martin called it a coalition of goodwill, or a coalition of conscience that could change the soul of the nation on the race issue.
This was bringing a mass meeting into the homes of millions of Americans who were seeing this thing that I had seen over and over and over again in small town churches everywhere, seeing this for the first time and hearing the oratory of America's premier orator, Martin Luther King.
No, we are not satisfied, and we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream.
I remember thinking when I saw Martin Luther King that he was going in his dream to bring the nation along, that he was irresistible in his call to mercy and love. I mean, that he was absolutely the most irresistible voice that had ever been heard.
Freedom and justice, I have a dream. My poor little children one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
You know, I was a little young. I do remember it. Martin Luther King was a very powerful effect on me, but it wasn't so much that I understood what he was saying, but I knew that he stood for me because I needed somebody to stand for me.
We will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
To me, that day represented one of the finest hours in American history.